he's one of those handfuls of people that you meet in your life that seems to know everyone. And that's a really good thing, because Gil's job is one where he's supposed to know everyone. And he does a fantastic job of that. Gil is the executive director at the Woodlands Economic Development Partnership, and the organization has been around for a good long time, since 1997, and it works very hard to attract and retain businesses to the North Houston, Greater Woodlands, CONROE area, and it's really, really neat. The networking events that they sponsor and put together are fantastic. They're a big part of the Economic Outlet Conference that happens every year, and that just took place. And so we're really leveraging on the heels of that. Gil gave remarks at that event, and he's going to share those remarks in maybe a slightly different summary form, but with us now today as well. So quick housekeeping item. Gil apparently has a little ADD tendency, and so if we interrupt him, he might get off track. So what we're going to ask everybody to do is, please, if you have questions, and we want lots of them, ask anything you want, but enter those into the chat room, and Bartow and I will monitor those, and then we'll look for opportunities to kind of slide those in. And we may end up holding some of them till towards the end, but we'll try to find some opportunities to slide those in. And Gil, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you get started.
Thank you, Brian, very much. FENG, the group, thank you for this opportunity. And it's very, very timely for us to present today, because, as Brian said, just last week, I presented at the Chamber's annual Economic Outlet Conference. And as you mentioned earlier, it was a hybrid event also. So there was over 400 at in person, and then it had additionally probably 200, maybe more, that were watching via the virtual environment. So it's alive and well here. So I'm going to go into our report that was presented that day, but we always start out, anytime that I present, about our wonderful staff. And I'm trying to get it, there we go. So this is the staff. Small as it is, it's very, very effective. We have 4 of us that make up the Economic Development Partnership. Holly Grew there is our Chief Operating Officer, as indicated. Mariana Cook is our Director of Business Retention and Expansion. And then finally, Ashley Byers is our Manager of Marketing and Outreach. And again, each is so effective in working together in what we do, create jobs and capital investment, and know people, Brian, just like you said. That's our intention, is to know as much about our business community as we possibly can. I think we do that pretty effectively. We're governed by a board of directors. Here's a photo of a few of them that are members. Many of you may recognize them. They're listed there on the left. And then you also will see some of our high-level investors, as we call them, gold level, that fund us, again, for the purpose of creating jobs and capital investment. So 88 members now currently fund our organization. And if you're familiar with economic development organizations, certainly in the state of Texas, many of them, and they're practically every community across the state, but many of them are supported by sales tax revenue. And state law allows you to add to your state base of 6.25 up to a penny, most are half a cent for every retail dollar dedicated to economic development. As many of you know, the Woodlands Township, by definition, is not a city. So that statute says you need to be a municipality to do that and dedicate it to economic development. So many years ago, 1997, as Brian said, we started as a division of the Chamber of Commerce. We were funded separately, we had a separate board, and we actually paid them a lease. So, but we were under their 501c6 as a nonprofit. So several years ago, we really grew to the size that it became increasingly more difficult to differentiate when you fund write a check to the chamber or to our organization, there was lots of confusion because it was the same FID. So the board decided, let's separate, and we did. So we're now our own 501c6 entity whose mission is, as I said, and here indicates, to promote job growth and economic vitality in our community. And we do that by recruiting new businesses. And before COVID, we were traveling the world and across the US, talking to employers, to companies, and trying to influence them to relocate to our community or expand. And so we've done that now for many, many years. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, we had to pull back on that, but we added to a significant marketing campaign for us and spread that campaign across the US in highlighting the Woodlands as a place to do business.
Gil, I can't resist the opportunity to interrupt for a moment with this slide, because it's meaningful for two reasons for me. If this were a live picture and I came over to the window in the center building and waved, you would see me. I'm in that building right now. That's where the Calvary Ferguson offices are. And then the building to the right, One Hughes Landing, that is if you went down to the ground level floor over to the far right corner, that's where our live meetings are for this chapter. The meetings are there in the business conference center on the first floor. I know that there are a number of, I see normal members that have come to our live meetings and others that have not. So I just wanted to point out, that's the building you go to when we start meeting live again, which hopefully will be very soon.
Well, this is we use this photograph quite a lot in our marketing campaigns because it is who we are as a business community. You have such quality assets there that are surrounded by every amenity you can imagine. So we use this slide quite a bit. And going back to the other slides, well, that was our office. We're to the left of these three buildings. We're down at the end of the lake in what it was known as CB&I's World Headquarters. But getting back to point, I told Brian, if you interrupt me, I could go down a rabbit trail all day. But in a key area here that says there, why do we exist? Job retention and expansion is critical, because my counterparts are always doing what we do, trying to lure them away. So we do have deep relationships within so many businesses, and you're going to see many of them listed here. And I'll talk in depth about what is happening with their workforce. But business recruitment is the high profile. When you land a big one, it gets all the press. But business retention and expansion is the day in, day out way to grow businesses. And we're so happy that we do have such a vibrant area to do that. Here's our service area. It's not just the Woodlands. As our name indicates, it's the Woodlands area. Certainly, we ride the coattails, if you will, of the brand, the Woodlands. And that's why that's always in our name, has been for years. And but we do cover areas, as indicated here, the city of Shenandoah, cities of Oak Ridge North, down south along that state or that county line there of Spring Creek is an area unincorporated. Many call it Spring. We cover that area. So this gives you a good indication of our service area, but it's also a good indication of the data that I'm going to talk about. This is the area that we pull it from, albeit most of it, a vast majority of it, is the Woodlands, because you'll see why in just a second. This next slide is a good indication. It was timely when it came out. And it was right before I presented at the Economic Outlet Conference. #1 best city to live in America. This is by niche.com. Many of you may know of this website. They were known many years ago as a site when you were thinking about relocating your family. You would go to this site. It would give you a good indication of schools in your area that you're moving to. Well, they've morphed into much more than that. They look at every aspect of our community, all of the assets, all of the amenities, and they come up with a ranking, and we rank according to Mitch.com as the best city to live in America. The number 2 best city to raise a family in America. And then, of course, best city to buy a house in America is, someone indicated how hot the real estate market is. Well, yes, that plays a big role in that right now for us on residential sales. But I will tie in this slide in just a minute regarding job growth. So it's kind of strange to say that, but it does go hand in hand with some of our data that I'm going to talk about. So keep that in mind when I say best city to live in America. And I'll explain that in more detail. So here's a snapshot of our survey that indicates our major employers. A major employer to us is identified as a company locally in that service area that has at least 100 jobs. And it goes up to, as you can see here, several thousand. So there's 87, I'll go in more detail, of those, of 84 actually, companies on the overall list. And I'll say that this report is a snapshot. So when we call them or we visit them individually, back in January, early February, we ask what their workforce count is that day. So this is not what it is perhaps even today. We don't know what, we have a good indication of the sectors are going to grow, so we know that, but keep in mind, this is a snapshot and of our top 10 in this particular case. Look at the diversity though. I think that's key to a vibrant economy in any given community. Just in the top 10, you see healthcare, you see education, manufacturing, not a sector that you would even dream of in the Woodlands. Energy, of course, and then professional and business services. So this is the top 10 that represents a few thousand employees. This list is on our website. So www.edpartnership.net, and you can find that list there and other pieces of data that you might find helpful. And I'll go into another piece of that in just a second. But this is the report as it was, again, back in January. 84 companies, again, are on that list. We've been conducting this survey for 20 years. Look what the numbers were back in 2001, which to me doesn't seem that long ago, but many that is a long time. But 26 companies were on the list back then. It easily fit on one page. And I started that report by saying, let's go with 100 jobs because everybody fits on one sheet as the minimum requirement. Well, now it's one sheet and you have to flip it over to get to the other half. But we're not going to stray away from that at this point. We're going to keep with 100 jobs as a major employer. And let me clarify something. 84 companies, there's many, many more that have at least 100 jobs, but they're retail. Retail is not part of our data. And I don't want to minimize the impact that retail sales has to a community, certainly ours. Sales tax generation is hugely beneficial to the operation of this community and the services that our government provides to Woodlands Township. But as a primary job creator, head of household type income, we look at those companies as a major employer. So there's 84 of them. We saw 4 companies added from last year. That was a huge surprise to me. How in the world during the pandemic did we add companies? Well, what happened primarily, we had mid-size employers, which I will actually talk about later, that have just under 100, 99, down to 40. So 40 jobs is the threshold for entering our mid-size employer believe it or not, it's on about a sheet. We started with that. So it takes a tremendous amount of time to collect that data because it's a lot of visits to office buildings and businesses, but we do that. So some of those 4 jumped up to the major list. They could even add 1 employee because they were at 99, they're now at 100, boom, you become a major employer. So primarily that's the reason for the jump in numbers. It's not new companies that just came in with 100 jobs. Unfortunately, that was the case. So driving down even further. So looking at this data dating back to 2011, in this case, up to this year when we conducted the survey, those 84 employers represents 38, almost 39,000 jobs. We know by demographic data, it's only about 60,000 jobs overall in our area. 60,000. Just 84 employers is considerably more than half of that. So we pay a lot of attention to these employers, and we certainly pay attention to their workforce numbers as they rise and fall, because that is a great indicator of the economic conditions of our community. If nothing else, this report does a fabulous job in analyzing the economics of your community. And so we pay really close attention to this data. So we'll see 38,559 last year, 38,660, not a big jump. I could go back to the depths of the recession that we all remember. And that was when at that time, I vividly remember, we were preaching, as I call myself a preacher sometimes. I was talking about flat was the new high. If you maintained your job or workforce numbers, you were doing fantastically well at that time, comparatively across the region. So we didn't certainly achieve that. We achieved 101 new jobs. Think about that, 101 new jobs out of 38,000 jobs is all that we grew our workforce numbers. So keep that filed away. I'll give you a good example. Brian, you were at the EOC, right? And I didn't mean to jump in.
I was actually not able to attend, Gil.
Well, this was what everybody fell on the floor on. The Friday before I delivered this report, and this data was never produced and shared with anyone until last week. You're only the second group to get to see this. The Friday before I was presenting on last Wednesday, I get a call from the president of Wildcat PPE, one of the line is there, who told me they were furloughing all of their employees. And as I explained to him, I said, just a second, I've got to collect myself. I need to get out of the floor. I need to sit down for a second, because am I understanding what you just said? 2,415 jobs. Do you remember the net gain that we had for the whole employee count? 101. I didn't have a lot of leeway to work with on that. So boom, like that, we went from 101 positive job net growth to 2,314 job loss. In the history of our community since 1974, first of all, we've never seen a job loss ever since 1974. Think about that. Every year since then, we've always had positive job growth collectively. When I got that news, before I had the furlough, it was truly one of the most surprising surveys that I've ever seen, because I was going to report a positive job growth. And I would have bet everything, I would have bet the farm, as they say, that we would have seen a job loss in the 2,300 range. Absolutely, I was prepared. I had my notes done, and then boom. When this company was coming along in the absolute height of the pandemic, I got the call that they were looking for warehouse space, which we're not known for, but we did have some. So this is last April, Mayish, a little over a year ago. I get the call that they want to open up a PPE manufacturing facility. Take advantage of the market. They had the capital to do it. They started from zero. In a few weeks, they were up to full capacity, offering 2 shifts a day. They had a contract initially with the Department of Defense for 40 million pieces. They were going to be there a while, fulfilling that contract at 40 million. That's just the DoD. So we were, to say the least, excited to see them come. Now I know, and I know who I'm talking to here. The economics of a unskilled, basically, certainly low skill manufacturer as compared to an energy company, there's no comparison. So the economics of the story of adding a net gain in jobs because of a manufacturer, it's not the same. We know that. But just looking at job count, yes, it's hugely impactful. And you can't tell me those 2,400 employees don't think it's impactful. Those were unemployed people. They had no skills. We had the homeless. We were going to helping them connect with homeless groups to find workers. And so they were putting people to work that had no hope of finding anything. So in that respect, it's hugely impactful. But also I know that the economics, it doesn't compare. So I go back to say, Wildcat PPE was such a huge impact on our community. And luckily we had the space sitting vacant for years, actually. Across the freeway, if you're familiar with the Woodlands, is the Woodlands Trade Center called CBS as a distribution facility there. You see it on the freeway frontage road. But behind that, they had another 115,000 square foot warehouse sitting empty. They call it their annex. And they haven't had a need for that in years. So they leased it to this group who put in a substantial amount of capital for the HVAC and to bring it really up to operational speed, and got it going in just a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. And they turned it around quickly. So when I was preparing the report, again, before that infamous Friday, I was going to give you that what if scenario. What if Wildcat did not show up last year? What if? That's where I am, 2,314 job loss year over year. And that was going to be, again, the story. But we know it's temporary. Those jobs are not there. I just verified yesterday. They're still not there. And the reason being, the DoD shut it down. In the change, when you change administrations, it was explained to me, you start looking, or the new group coming in wants to look at big contracts. This happened to be one of them. And so they said, let's just review that. We're going to put this on hold. And they did. And when you do business with one customer primarily, that's what happens. They've learned their lessons on that. They're trying to, again, get a broader base of customers, but it's temporary. They know that eventually they will honor that contract of 40 million pieces and get these workers back. We've got every elected official in our community on this. Kevin Brady, Senator Cornyn, you name it. They've been very helpful to push this through and to get it going. So that's a temporary part of our report. Now let's go into, excuse me, the sectors. Where are those jobs? Those 38,600 plus jobs. this is where it gets really interesting. Energy for years and years and years is number one, without a doubt. Primarily due to the ExxonMobil is certainly a part of that. Not the huge campus to the south, but right here on the lake where Brian's office is, right behind his office building, is ExxonMobil with about 1,500 jobs. Well, we know about Anadarko and they're still Occidental. They still are here. Occidental is here. So that's a huge part of it. But they had some significant number of job losses that moved them down to number 3. They were number 2 last year. Now they're number 3. Healthcare, I reported last year, was number 1, and that was the first time in our 20-year history of doing this report that they reached the number 1 status. For years, I've been saying, healthcare is growing, healthcare is growing. Well, if you know about this community, you know that healthcare plays a huge role. And you have basically all of the acute care down in the medical center out here. Certainly Memorial Hermann, that was our first one. And you've got St. Luke's, and you've got Texas Children's, and then across the freeways, Houston Methodist, and then just west of all of that is MD Anderson. So they're all here, and they're all doing extremely well. Look at the gap just between number 1 and number 2. That changed significantly. Healthcare just grew by leaps and bounds ahead of even education, which is at 10 points. Energy it's going to come back. I firmly believe that. We can keep the price of oil steady as it is right now. We'll see that. Professional and business services, you see that. And then you see that next category. Again, one employer impacted that one sector, manufacturing. That's not who we're known as. What if someone asks me, what's your niche market? Professional jobs, headquarters, because of the assets that we have. You know, the picture that we were looking at earlier, and I point, I always get directional here. Hughes Landing, all the office space, Class A office space, that's our niche asset. Well, that goes hand in hand with our niche companies or niche business, that being a really conglomerate of industry, but healthcare is leading them all. It's just remarkable. And it goes all the way down to social services, which is basically, if anyone knows our community well, is like interfaith of the Woodlands, and major employer, significant number of jobs. Life sciences there because of dating back to the early days of Research Forest area of our community. And then you see the rest. Financial services is in there. Big number, large number of banks that have those jobs that we are counting again in this particular sector. So let's go even further into it though, and see what healthcare and education. Do you remember again the slide that says we're the number 1 best city to live in America? That's one. This sector is number 1. 2 sectors typically grow when you have a surge in population. Both of ours are indicating that. Healthcare number 1, education number 2. Those are the 2 sectors that you hope grow to meet the surge in population growth. And healthcare is certainly there. Back to that top 10 list, 50% of just the top 10, half are healthcare. Represents almost 11,000 jobs. That's unbelievable. It's not over. We have 3 cranes in the air right now in the Woodlands area. 3 cranes. 2 of them are healthcare. The other one is high-rise residential multifamily in Shenandoah. Memorial Hermann is adding a new tower. That's $250 million expansion. Across the freeways, Methodist, they're adding 100 beds, 45 ER beds, $240 million. $500 million in healthcare expansion going on right now. So it's not over. I'll be saying the same thing next year. Number one industry by a considerable margin will be healthcare, without a doubt. Education's number two. This is a photo actually of Lone Star College, Montgomery, which is growing. Largest community college in the state, 95,000 students of the system. They're really, really prospering even during the depths of this pandemic. New high school across the freeway, elementary schools across the freeway, which is where you can add schools right now, is on the east side of our service area. So 20% of those top 10 were education, represents about 7,000. Now, keep in mind, when we do our job count, let's go back to CISD. CONROE Independent School District is much larger employer than my numbers indicate. But I'm only reporting again what's here. I'm not reporting what's in CONROE or to the east in CISD numbers. So this is really a good indicator again, the surge in population and those two sectors, thankfully, are adding to it. So I thought it would be worth looking at another group of employers that we typically don't really dive into. They have an impact, don't get me wrong, but because we saw 4 companies make that jump up to 100 jobs, actually more, we thought let's go into it and see where we are. So here's the top 10 mid-size. You know many of them. GEOSOUTHERN's been here for decades, right at 99 jobs. I even called back to make sure. Are you sure you're only at 99? You can't find one employee somewhere. Nope, they were 99. So they take it very seriously for accurate numbers. But look at the sectors here. I'm going to look down here for a second. Energy, that's GEOSOUTHERN. Healthcare, that's senior care facilities primarily. Financial services, you see that. Professional business services, real estate development, and life science. Even broader group of businesses are in the mid-size, on the top 10 certainly. But you know most of them. And keep in mind now, these, even though they're a mid-size, some of these are huge, huge corporate employers, Kroger. That's the Houston office. This is their regional office. They have a president there. This is not, we're not counting the food stores around the villages of the Woodlands or out across the freeway and beyond. This is just the regional office. But it gives you a good understanding of that next group of employers that may fall into companies that you do business with, that you really don't see that often. But its full list is on our website. And that actually is 62 employers. So 62 companies are on the mid-size. You're not talking about job numbers, certainly like I just reported on, but say 4,000 jobs with those mid-sized employers. Again, represented by 62 companies. But look at this next slide. This is again shocking. Look at number 1, healthcare. Number 1 sector. You can rest assured that the overall largest employee sector is healthcare. But did you know that healthcare is the number 1 employee sector in the state? The number 1 in the Houston region? Yes, we're the energy capital of the world. But if you look at the sheer numbers, healthcare is number 1. And it is holding true with our own community. Energy's number 3, as it was. Professional business services is an interesting one. It was number 4 for us. It's number 2 here. But it is absolutely remarkable how these sectors line up compared to the major employers. So keenly important to the overall performance of our community. And we close this this particular thing about Stronger Together. This is a campaign that we actually did for healthcare employees. During the height of the pandemic, we know how truly hard they were working to keep up with the care of COVID patients. And so we thought, let's create a campaign and go out and promote it with all of our acute care hospitals, and we did. So we created these bands, thousands of them, thousands. But Stronger Together is a good indicator that all of our truly sectors together is strong. If you had to focus on one sector, you'd be in trouble. Any community that has a leading sector by, several percentage points, or certainly more than half, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. It's going to happen. You don't know when, but it's going to happen. Someday you're going to take a dip, and it would be totally devastation. Now, I'm going to go down a rabbit trail here because it just came to mind. We talked about, someone again brought up real estate. Industrial real estate is off the chart business in areas, in levels they've never seen ever in the Houston region. I just attended and moderated a discussion down in Houston with a group called Red News, Real Estate Development News. And there were several brokers and developers there in that sector. And they were telling us numbers that truly we didn't think we'd ever see, which is not our niche market. Keeping in mind what I said our niche market was, that's not us. Office design, it's really hurting. We're seeing vacancy levels that we've never seen before, ever. We're running, the reports vary because it depends on who you ask and what group is collecting the data, but it's running around 16, 18% vacant. In office space, that's a big number. When you talk about square footage, 13 million. So that's a big number to backfill. So that is, we're seeing certainly interest in office space, but it's not big users at all. 5,000 square feet, not a full floor like shown here, which would be a little over 20,000 square feet, not those. Albeit we had one just pulled down just recently with Lind Energy. They just pulled down 120,000 square feet, but it's not there. It's just not. I got two phone calls sitting right here on my desk that I haven't returned yet from California that are interested in coming out here, but they're small users. One was 2,500, one was 3,000, but they're going to come here. That's a good thing. I'm sorry for those that do business in California, but that is a hot market for us right now. And so I'll conclude with that, Brian. If there's any questions, and you can be as broad as you want. If I can't answer it, I'll tell you. And I appreciate your interest and again the opportunity to speak today.
Well, Gil, I actually typed one in so I wouldn't forget, just as you were talking about the office vacancy rate. I think you said it was around 16.8%, if I caught that correctly.
Right.
Are you seeing much difference in comparing Class A versus Class B, or is it pretty consistent across the board?
Class B is actually not performing well, and you know why? It's the term they use with that session I was talking about. The flight to quality is important because there's so much of it out there that you would want to go to a Class A building if that opportunity is there, and the concessions are there, and there's a lower lease rate. Believe it or not, I'm starting to see Class A lease rates falling. I didn't think I would ever see that. Because typically what you will hear is they'll keep the integrity of the base pretty steady. And then follow up though with concessions, a year free lease, a larger tenant allowance, et cetera. But even it depends on the asset, but I'm seeing lease rates falling down. Good thing for a tenant. I'm telling you, this is the time to negotiate a lease. Absolutely is. For office space. Industrial, forget it. you're going to play market or above. It's totally the opposite.
Your prediction, Gil, for companies that would move into the area in the upcoming year or two will probably be heavily dominated from the West Coast?
That's where most of my phone calls are coming from. I'm also getting interest from New York, that area, the Northeast, but California seems to be, I even hear from residential real estate professionals that they're getting many clients from the West Coast. And it's hard to know why they're coming here. They don't get into that much detail, but you can ask just about any of them that have significant listings. West Coast is definitely very active.
And Gil, this is kind of just a curiosity point for me. I actually had my semi-annual appointment with my cardiologist just the other day. And I was talking to him about how much of a mini med center the Woodlands area has become. And of course, as you know, we're within easy driving distance to the best medical center in the entire world in the Houston Medical Center.
Right.
Is that driving? I've got to believe it does somehow, some way drive some of the regional significance for the Woodlands area as well, because you have people that say live maybe out past Huntsville, Madisonville, over in Livingston that are now coming for their health care into our region, whereas before they would have gotten by with whatever doctors,
right,
community hospital they have, and then make the really long trek if something was really bad all the way down into the Houston Med Center and drive 4 hours or something to get there. Is there anything anecdotally that you can share about that?
You know, what we see, the pandemic, I'll go back to the pandemic again. There seems to be a growing interest in to get away from a dense population area. I think we would all agree with that, to try to get out of the densely urban areas because of the pandemic. Suburban markets typically were just that. They didn't have health care. You had to drive back into the city for that. Most suburban markets don't even come close into the employers that we have. So that's what makes us very popular. They can not only escape the dense urban area of Houston in this case, and come out to the suburbs, work here. You obviously can go to any level of healthcare needs or go to a provider for any healthcare need that you have practically, and feel safe in that environment, enjoy it. So without a doubt, suburban markets are hot right now, but we can say that we're a step above that typically.
Very good, very good. Well, the theme seems to be, waiting, hoping, praying, doing whatever we can do to help energy rebound. Obviously, that will continue to drive our area's economy a great deal as the future unfolds. And then probably opportunities for people that are on the job search to figure out ways to retool if they can and move into healthcare, because I think that's one of the most stable as I think about things. And I never look at things regularly the way that you do, but if I think about demographics and economic trends, things like that, boy, healthcare just seems to be a stabilizing force. If you've got that in your economy, it doesn't seem like that has the same kind of recession. It's more recession proof, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right?
Without a doubt. And now overall healthcare pays well overall, but a big part of that certainly again doesn't equate to the energy jobs, which are known, so known for their high wages. But healthcare is a significant part of our employee base. And I didn't even talk about individual doctor's offices. Drill it down as far as you want to drill it. Healthcare is absolutely dominating right now. And that's not going to slow down. It's just not.
Okay.
Hey, Gil, yes, there's Larry Abston's posted a question on the chat room. And the question is, how do you see the success of the Woodlands expanding into adjacent areas, including expansion of 249 into West Montgomery County? will the model be replicated?
No, it won't. I mean, I'll be very frank with you. First of all, it's hard to accumulate a large parcels of land anymore unless you go further away from the environment, because there's multitudes of owners now to accumulate land that's necessary to build a master plan community. There's just none left in this area. Woodlands is truly, it's a big, get a few thousand more residents. We're at 119,000 right now. It won't be much bigger than that ever, because we're landlocked. And so that won't change. Now, what Howard Hughes has done, obviously, is they knew that was coming. So let's go further north up to CONROE for Woodlands Hills master plan community. It won't be the Woodlands though. It won't be a destination for employers. It'll be just as many of them are right now. A place to live, a place perhaps to shop for your groceries, the retail, a little retail. And that's it. But you're going to be in a master plan residential. And then the over on 290, what is the name of the development that's went blank? That's so hugely been Bridgeland. Bridgeland is one of the top selling residential master plan communities in the nation, if not the top. It is hugely successful right now. Their time has come. They've been there for several years, but now the growth is going out that direction. The infrastructure's in for the Grand Parkway and for the widening of 290 in certain areas. Yeah, that's where the growth is happening, because that's where they could put together parcels of land.
Great response. Another question has been posed for you as well, which is, and this comes from Fernando Hases, and he says, which foreign countries have showed the most interest in the Woodlands?
Good question, Fernando. That is a good one. And of course, Mexico is always there, it's perhaps because it's our leading trading partner, number one. And there's just so much interest in our community from those Mexican nationals that want to bring their families here and live here and stay. They may be commuting back and forth, albeit at least head of household may be, but Mexico's number one. I'm telling you, I get calls all the time from all over the world, literally from Asia to Europe, from South America. We have traveled across this world talking to companies and to government officials about working together. But Mexico by far is the number one, without a doubt.
Great. Okay. Does anyone else have more questions for Gil? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank you, Gil, for taking time out of your early Wednesday morning to spend with us and enlighten the FANG membership about some of the latest and greatest data and stats on the employers, major and mid-size, in the Woodlands area and the impact that they have. And my hope for everyone is that helps you as you not only think about just your personal, your personal life, but also your professional life.
Absolutely.
And the impacts that it has for you personally, as well as the businesses that you work for or own and run, and the other kinds of businesses that you're likely to be working with more and more as they continue to thrive and grow in the area. Okay. All right.
The opportunity.